Noting.
At this point, when we're all set. Good evening, members of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Purple, and members of the public on YouTube. Calling to order at 6:38 p.m., July 21, 2020, the July 21, 2020 meeting of the Southborough Board of Selectmen. Welcome. And the meeting is being held at Southborough's Public Safety Complex in the training room of that complex through the good graces of our police chief and fire chief who have helped make this possible. This is the first in-person meeting of the Southborough Board of Selectmen in 4 months. And so we appreciate Mr. Purple's efforts, Ms. Hale's efforts, and the police chief's efforts we can actually see each other for the first time in 4 months. And we're here with a pretty short agenda, but the final item on the agenda are at least the first meeting for our FY 2020 goal setting discussion is going to take up the bulk of the meeting. But why don't we move to item 2, our consent agenda. We've got 2 items. The appointment of Brandon Donahue as a special police officer. Items related to that are in our packet. And the approval of a new golf committee charge that was drafted and has since been revised by Ms. Malinowski. Are there any holes on either item 2A or 2B?
I have a comment on B.
All right, Mr. Stivers?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. First, some feedback that we've gotten in terms of the first point. And the second part of this.
For duties.
The duties. Committee shall manage day-to-day relationship. It seems to me it might be worth considering a small change to that to say committee shall monitor the relationship with the current management company, because that sounds to me like it's too micromanagement, hands-on, versus what I think the committee is likely to do. So I would suggest that. I don't know how other people feel about it, but it seems to me it's more.
How about oversee?
Oversee day-to-day or oversee management?
Oversee day-to-day.
That still sounds too micro to me, but, one person's opinion. So the day-to-day is what I guess concerns me.
I guess my view is I don't have a problem with any of the language, because I think that management, I agree we don't want micromanage, but I think any management can be by delegation. Mm-hmm. Can be by any number of means, but ultimately for purposes of the dealings with the day-to-day relationship with the current management company will rest with the golf course committee. So I agree that no one should be micromanaging. I mean, they're in charge of the golf course.
Yep.
But in terms of responsibility for management, again, I think that could be by delegation or otherwise. So I'm not troubled by that term. That's my view. Okay,
I read the tea leaves. I will withdraw my comment.
Any other comments, discussions about either item A or item B?
I will move items 2A and B under consent agenda.
Second.
We don't have to do a roll call.
Roll call.
You do not.
Wow.
I know, this
favor.
is all new again.
Aye, vote is unanimous.
Yeah.
And so we will move on to item 3, which is the primary purpose of tonight's meeting, which is our FY 2020 goal-setting discussion. And I think I mentioned this at our last meeting. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a couple of these types of meetings anyway, in the way, unless incumbents are running every year and always being reelected, we're always going to have new members on the board, or almost always going to have new members, and that brings new ideas, new perspectives, and the like. Layering on top of that this year are 2. I'm not sure if there are events like this in my lifetime. Certainly not in the last, I guess, since 9/11, quite frankly. but that is obviously the COVID-19 crisis and the aftermath of the Floyd murder in Minneapolis. And so I think particularly this year, there's good reason for this being a launch meeting to our discussion for goals and planning for fiscal year 20. I think I think it's going to be a challenging but exciting fiscal year 20. And the other thing is, I don't have any big trips planned this summer. And even if you do, with the remote participation, wherever we might be, it's easy to call in and participate.
Yeah.
So my expectation is that we cover a decent amount of ground tonight. Sort of get our respective temperatures, have people make pitches for what they think our priorities should be, and then it'll be a good ground setting meeting for at least one follow-up. And so one of the things I thought about doing is that we've got a number of sort of lists that people put together. What I thought is maybe Lisa, starting with yours, to walk through it, and you can talk, and there's going to be some overlap when we get to other people. But I don't want to be rigid about it. And as we get to, as you talking about a particular item, if something that someone else has proposed touches upon that or the like, then we can just weigh in. And Mark, I think the ideal would be, as we go along in this process, to identify things that we don't have to take a vote, but the sort of the consensus of the board that this is an item that we want to seriously consider putting in a package of specific goals for fiscal year 21. And again, at a subsequent meeting and then subsequent meetings, we can talk about those and what our progress is and the like. Does that all that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
And I will be brief. How's that?
Okay.
So the first item was open meeting law for our boards and committees, how to run a proper meeting. I think one thing Zoom has shown me, it's given me the opportunity to participate in a lot of meetings I may not have gone to in the past. So there's just a few things that I've seen, adhering to agendas, how to do a proper vote, distribution of documents. These are just some things I'd like to see some additional training, and I think this ties in, I know, specifically with one that Chelsea has as well, about training for chairs and vice chairs. I don't think anybody is intentionally doing anything wrong, or I just think for so long everything's been done in a silo, and Zoom creates an opening for everyone. So I'd just like to have an item that we can discuss how we can better serve our boards and committees, leading by example, and giving them the tools that they need to be successful in their meetings now that with Zoom, it's a little more scrutiny than maybe there has been in the past.
Mm-hmm. And, I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
And I think it's both, Ms. Malinowski's item, but also the item in mine. One of the things that we have, the Board of Selectmen has evolved to over the years is pretty robust presentation of our agenda. And with the agenda, the inclusion of a packet, so that days before the meeting, people know not only what the black and white of the item is on the agenda, but also what underlies it.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because, if you see something that talks about, an appointment or something like that, well, that's fine, but then you see, who the prospective appointment is, what underlies it and the like. So I think that in addition to whatever steps we want to discuss along open meetings lines and additional transparency, also talk about things like posting of agendas. And along those same lines, it's kind of funny talking about it in this environment, but at some point we're going to emerge from this, and we're going to be having all face-to-face meetings again. And I don't like mandating anything, quite frankly, but just short of mandating, encouraging all of our boards and commissions to televise their meetings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right.
It is. I see nodding all around. It just strikes me that that's so important. And again, it's kind of funny that the Zoom world that we're in has really reinforced that, because, you know, it's kind of nice. My youngest daughter was kidding me last night because I was sitting in the kitchen with my earphones on, watching the most recent capital planning committee.
Yep.
You know, if it's on, if it's on the website, if it was recorded, the fact that you were there becomes much less relevant. You can touch base back and see what was going on. It's great for a selectman to be able to do that. It's also great for folks just who are townspeople. So those are a couple of additional ideas I have.
I think those are great, Marty, and I think it supplements the minutes. If people typically want to know something on a past meeting, they go back to the minutes, and the minutes aren't as descriptive specifically as somebody might be looking for. So I think that I completely agree with continuing to participate in Zoom, because I think it gives the public additional access to all the boards and committees. And you never know, somebody might watch a meeting and say, well, I might like to serve on that as well. So I think there's additional opportunities. But
You know, for so long, we relied upon SAM,
we did.
Southborough Access Media, to be the sole source for recording meetings, but I think that, you know, we're now, as we're doing tonight, we're being exposed to other means that are out there. So I think it'd be great to continue with SAM. I think their production is great. I think that they do a great job. But for other, you know, they can't cover everything, and it's impossible to ask them to step up to cover everything. But
And these Zoom licenses aren't going away. So, you know, one of the issues that we've had is not having enough meeting space.
Yeah.
Okay, and now that, you know, the fire station was gone, you know, that was a meeting room that was used a little bit. Now you've got this room, but police and fire do use it for training and all sorts of other things. So it's not available as much. So really, you've got McAuliffe training room and over at Porterville, you know, with the senior center, to the extent maybe you can break that up into 2 rooms if it's small meetings. We don't have a lot of meeting space. So I think some of these smaller committees, trails, open space, things like that, can still operate, you know, maybe even historical, you know, in a Zoom environment, plus they'll be taped, and, you know, you'll have that history, and I forget which one of you already said that, but maybe it was Lisa, that we don't have a lot of that taped history, and we'll continue to have that now in our YouTube library.
And Zoom also gives the capability of calling in experts from afar to weigh in on things very easily that you could never afford to pay somebody to travel here about something. So I think it's great. Lisa, to one of your earlier points, I think this is something that we could actually do very quickly. That I've also observed various groups meeting now with Zoom who bypass some of the steps that are probably important here. So I think we could easily get a one-page summary out to all the committee chairs saying, here are the things that please remember to do these things in addition to reading the statement at the beginning. You got to vote on every motion. You got to have a roll call vote on it, and so on and so forth.
But I'm sorry, Lisa, I can also reach out to, you know, a lot of, you know, some of the bigger communities, you know, and how do you have any guidance? Because some of them do have guidance that they give their boards and committees on, you know, how to run a meeting, you know, how to run an effective meeting. I went up and looked on Maya's website today because they have all sorts of trainings and everything, but I had Lori reach out to them directly to see, because I didn't see it. Do you have a training for boards and committees on how to run an effective meeting? Because there is a certain amount of liability, to Sam's point, you know, if you simply, for example, just take, you know, make a motion a second and you never actually vote on the motion and you move on, and then you assume that action is good, and if there's any liability that falls out of that, you know, there isn't always, but you know.
And we, you know, the turnover on our boards and committees as well. I mean, you can't necessarily expect somebody that has never really served, but you're thankful they're stepping up, but we're putting a lot of responsibility on them without very little training. I mean, it's all about tools for me. You know, everybody knows, Marty, I know your process too, and Chelsea to some degree, and I guess all of us, but if we give them the tools, then everybody should be successful. We shouldn't have open meeting law violations. You know, a better understanding, and whatever we need to do that, I don't think it's anything too hard, you know, I don't.
So I think that's an easy one to include on our list.
Easy follow-up,
And I think one other thing is we also have turnover in chairs and vice chairs, and I think if we could just kind of, I mean, we have some committees in town who run really great meetings, and I think if we can build a model after kind of what we've seen work well and kind of pass that information along to other boards, and I think if we're able to record all of these meetings, then we can refer to those. I also think, to Sam's point, being able to bring somebody in from afar, I think that goes for our department heads too, right? They don't have to sit at a BOS meeting from 6:30 till 9 o'clock to address their agenda item because it's last on the list. They can be multitasking at home and then chime in when their expertise is needed. So I think that's also a good thing.
One other point, and it's kind of loosely connected, I think, to these meetings, but, these remote meetings, but I'm seeing it now. The board recently voted an update to the email policy, which essentially said, and this is what John Rooney intended when we started down this road, is that everybody has a town email address. Town email is used to conduct town business. You shouldn't be doing it off your personal stuff. You shouldn't have town email sent to your personal stuff. If you want to have your town email forwarded to your personal email, that's your business. And if you happen to reply to a town email or a town business from your personal email, you should be copying your town email so that there's a record of it. We have had issues with certain boards and committees that, I'm not getting the information. I don't know where the links are. I haven't seen the stuff. Why am I not seeing things? I'm a board member. I should have it. Because they're not checking their town emails. Some people are not really very aware of their town emails. Now, Tom, has done an awful lot of outreach on this, but there is still some resistance. So I'm just giving you a heads up that is something that, you may have to help to, enforce at some point.
Yeah, and there is, I get it though. I mean, I remember when I was on the Main Street Working Group and got a town email, and I was like, oh, that's nice. I mean, it's incumbent upon us to sort of reinforce people, because there's not, in the same way, I mean, I was thinking, we were talking about, the idea of having a checklist for chairs. I remember, it's a number of years ago now, but the first committee I was on in town was the Personnel Board. And after a year or two, I got voted chair. And the vote was taken and everything like that, and, Marty Healy's chair. And I remember just sitting there going, okay, it's like the old movie The Candidate, what do I do now? And even when you're on a committee, you don't necessarily think of, oh, that's right, I've got to make sure that things move along. So having all of those things make an awful lot of sense, and I think we can put together a pretty robust checklist, both for a chair and for the committee itself to
there's a learning curve. If you come on a board like this board, I think this is a good example. If you come on this board, you've got some people on here who have been chair, who have done it, and so if someone like Sam or Chelsea, comes on and they watch Marty, or you watch Lisa, you watch Brian, everything in that, you understand how these things are supposed to work, so you've got somebody good. But if you've got someone who's not familiar with the right way to do things, then all you're doing is learning the wrong things to do. So when you become chair, you're just going to, that's how we're supposed to do it.
One of the things that was most beneficial for me personally when I got on the board is I had heard that MMA had a Selectmen's handbook. And I asked Mark about it, and I was able to get a copy. And I read this thing through and through, and I will tell you, having a guide, we don't need to do anything that extensive, but just having something to explain processes, and I really appreciated that. And I think we could do something on a much smaller scale for our boards and committees.
Yes, and my guess is we'll start it, and next year, when we're looking at it, we're saying, oh, you know what, we should have included this, we should have included that, and it'll grow over time into something that is really useful.
Yeah.
So good.
We took care of number 2.
All right.
So we already talked about Zoom. Updating and consolidating policies and making sure our volunteers understand and have better guidance and understanding of our expectations of adherence. This is something I think that has been on, Brian, you probably know, we talk about this at all the goal-setting meetings, updating, rewriting. There are so many different policies out there. Some are the same policies, just approved at different times, but you can still find them if you're looking for a particular policy. You may find the right one. So, and again, this could fall into number 7, the handbook for employees and volunteers. So I think it would be great to take a look at all the policies we have. Some of them are probably obsolete at this point, and consolidate them in one place. And I would be happy to, if the board is interested in doing that, to work with another board member and spearhead doing that. Again, the policies are written and approved. I don't know that there's a whole lot of editing and changes, maybe a little updating. So I don't think this is a huge undertaking by any means.
Godspeed.
I think there's an organizational gap here, and that I'd ask for a copy of the policies, current policies, and Vanessa sent me a whole bunch of them. I compared against what's listed on the website, and there wasn't a particularly great match there. A number of them are very old, so I think that somebody going through there carefully and thinking about, coordinating, rationalizing all those things, and identifying any gaps or redundancies or whatever.
Absolutely.
Is
I mean, I think that there are policies that, that are old policies that, were then replaced by new policies, but the old policy was left in place.
Right.
So you've got a policy in terms of donations and gifts and everything that follows the ethics bylaw. And then we have one, I'm not kidding, we have one, a bylaw for donations that employees can only accept donations of baked goods. Okay? And so it's a little bit confusing depending
So
which.
what's wrong with that?
Which one, well, there's nothing wrong with that, but if, well, lately
Yep.
there is, but, but it's,
Yep.
I think there needs to be, some consistency in going over it.
Mm-hmm.
Several communities ago, there was a comprehensive policy book for the
Yep.
Board of Selectmen. So every policy that the board did was kept in a book.
Yep.
And, I know we tried to move away from a paper environment to an online environment, and that's fine, but we still just need to, make sure everything's there and what we want. There may be some things saying, we don't have a policy on this. Then let's go find a couple of policies that we can use. There's no sense reinventing the wheel on a lot of this stuff.
Yep.
Mark, who does it make sense and Lisa, you love this stuff, so having, spearheading it is a great idea. And if someone else wants to do it on the board, but what might make sense is Vanessa's not here, so I'll volunteer for everything.
Easy
tonight.
to, yeah.
She gave me a list of what she's willing to volunteer for. I know where this is gonna go.
But it just strikes me that, and maybe Vanessa's not the right person, but maybe she
Yeah.
is, but somebody in the townhouse, who also has ownership of that.
Yep.
Yep.
I think that makes an awful lot of sense. I suspect that if you mention this to Mr. Haggerty, that he also will, maybe his assistant clerk is somebody who'd be perfect to play a role in this, because obviously they're gonna be responsible for, cataloging, a lot of the policies, so.
So I will say, Marty, so when, before I put this down, at different times, and why this came up was, I've asked different people in the townhouse for different policies, and I get a different policy that's kind of the same policy, depending on who you ask. And Jim, at one point in time, when you signed up for board and committee and got sworn in, you got a packet. And in that packet, there was like a code of conduct, but there was an updated code of conduct that the Board of Selectmen had that wasn't in the packet. So again, it's consolidating all in one place. And I thought it was great that as people were coming in to get sworn in, that Jim was able to give them everything that they could possibly need for success.
Yep.
And I think that's what even number one kind of leads to. If we have any information, we can put all together. And online is even great too. I've gone and I've searched on the town website for different policies and whatnot over time. If there's a spot on the Board of Selectmen website, we could just, and again, this comes to your repository that we talked about before for legal stuff, one place where people can go to get what they need.
Yeah.
That's kind of.
So
what
I think, and I think that just jumping ahead like you did to your number 7, I think those are two different things. Because, for example, there are certain board and committee members that take a look at the email policy that they are bound to, and they're like, it says employee, I'm not an employee.
Gotcha.
So this doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
So,
No, you're right.
I think it's, it's two separate things, obviously,
Agreed.
because you're going to address different things for different people.
No, I agree.
Okay, so what are we going, the first one was easy, it's matters, relating to open meetings. Do we want to, identify this as volunteer policies? Is that what we want to call it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I actually brought a few of the policies, I don't have them all with me. There's like an appointment policy for boards and committees, that was done in 2017. There's a code of conduct policy, I know there's a couple different ones floating out there. I actually have a stack of different.
I think it's simply updating Board of Selectmen policies.
I
Going back
agree.
and take, let's
agree.
put together what we have. So it's almost cataloging, I think, at this point, is what is the policy? When was it last updated?
Yeah.
And, is the recommendation that this should be, updated? And then it's like, okay, what don't we have here that we think we should? And
Right.
Marty, you were correct. Lisa loves to go and do her surveys and look in other communities. And these people all have this, these people have, so what are we missing that really we should have?
Yep.
In our
The board
policy
can-
arsenal.
The board can update, and we can, whoever, me and whomever else on the board works on this, can bring to the board, and then, the board, obviously, I wouldn't write a complete policy without edits and comment from the board, because we all look at things a little differently, so,
Well, and I'm constantly looking through other towns to see what they're up to
yeah.
and what they have and the like.
Arlington, Needham,
Good
those are two of the places that I'll go when I'm looking for something.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sam.
I'd broaden that a little bit, Lisa and Mark. It seems to me not only do you pull them together, but I think it's worthwhile you're doing that to review them and see if there are inconsistencies
Yes.
in there. So in other words, reading them and say,
Yep.
oops, this policy says such
Yep.
and such, this policy says something else. So
Yep.
identifying things that we need to resolve
Yep.
in there would be very helpful to avoid
Bring like a maybe a
confusing
red
people.
line version,
Yep.
To the
Yep.
board, so you can see
Yeah.
what changes. No, that's great.
So I'd be willing to help with that too.
There we go. You guys trust the girl?
More than myself.
Yeah, I think that's,
How did I end up at this table?
Yeah, that would be great, and, again, at the end of the day, all of our goals are to make things easiest and best for the citizens and our volunteers.
Mr. Chairman, if we agree to all 10 of these, are we done?
Some of these are like so,
Made good progress.
some of these tie together. Do you want me to continue?
yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, so number 4 is just basically, it's about appropriation of line items. I've always been a little worried about this, so at the end of a fiscal year, if somebody has money left in a salary line, they could just spend it on whatever. I think it's setting an example that if you take something out of a line item that's been approved by town meeting, specifically, that the taxpayers have voted for something specific, then I think there should be some level of approval or oversight on that. And I know in the past, sometimes a salary item has gone towards, I'll just use a printer as an example, but something. But I just think there needs to be some level of oversight for the taxpayer, just to make sure that expectation of returning money at the end of the year. It doesn't have to be spent.
So just to clarify, at town meeting for each department,
Yeah.
most department that have employees, so you vote 2 numbers. You vote a personnel number and you vote an
Correct.
expense number.
Correct.
And so the departments are bound to those numbers for those things. Now, at the end of the year, if they want to do interdepartmentals or to move things around and things like that, there needs to be approvals for that.
Yeah, at the end of the year,
Yeah.
and before the end of the year, as we're going through the budget process, Brian comes to us with essentially a snapshot of where things stand currently in the fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing that internally, whether it's on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, he either generates or certainly could generate a report that shows exactly where we are in terms of expenditures for each line item.
Sure.
I mean, what you're looking for, it seems to me, Lisa, would flow easily from us. I mean, it strikes me that I'd like to see,
Yep.
for instance, a quarterly report that basically breaks down the budget by, again,
Yep.
it has to be already done, because we're seeing it at various times when we're
Yeah.
going into the next.
So when
budget phase.
so this ClearGov budget software that, like I said, I'm kind of a one-man team tonight, because I was kind of hoping maybe Brian would be here and maybe Vanessa. I can't give you fully formed answers on some of the stuff, but the ClearGov software that we got to help us with our budget is going to be something that is going to be up on the website and available, to view in real time. So at any point, if you wanted to go up and take a look and see where Public Works is in their spending and everything in that, you'll get a pretty good, I don't know to what level of detail, that you will get, but you'll get an understanding where their spending has been, and where it is at any given time during the year. So it's one of these pieces that, you know, is going to help with the collaborative process and the transparency between this board, advisory, departments. So it should help to streamline some of these conversations that we have around budget season, you know, and because everyone's going to have that same information at the same time.
So again, Brian's not here tonight, so we can assign him stuff too.
Exactly, yeah.
Works for me.
But it strikes me from what you've described, Mark, that it would be, I just think it'd be worthwhile to, you know, to put it on our, you know, a tickler for every, well, what is this? This is July, so July, August, you know, our second meeting in September, that we get a first quarter budget report. And Brian comes in with his spreadsheet and explains to us, and for instance, what happened this year with the whole building thing.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be able to, you know, somebody would look and go, wait a minute, why have we spent 80% of this budget already?
Right.
And, you know, with 5, 6, 7 different sets of eyes looking at it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, what is then the next one? December, our second meeting in December, we get a mid-year report. And just, you know, and then once we get into the budget season, then we're getting almost bi-weekly reports on what's going on. But it would give us a heads up, and it strikes me from what you just described, that it's relatively easy to do.
So I think, so until we get the ClearGov up and running, it should be good. I don't know whether you want me to sit with you or to give, or just to give us a sense, here's what I'm looking for in the report. Because the accountant is probably the one that's going to put this together. And so, you know, this is what I want for each department type of, you know, I don't know how granular, you know, we'll want to go on terms of, you know, whether we're just looking at numbers, whether we want to see what's behind the numbers. So we can chat about that. I mean, now that tonight's probably not the night to figure that out, but,
Absolutely.
you know, I want to make sure we're giving you something that you're gonna, that this is what you want and something that's helpful.
Other people are much better with financial numbers and the like. And I only get involved with financial numbers when somebody's done something wrong with it. So it's a different sort of analysis. It sounds like, again, there's general agreement that something like that would be useful for us to have.
Can I
Okay.
add one comment to that?
Yes.
I think there's another dimension here that's of interest. My recollection of my days of yore on advisory, that there are the numbers, which we certainly want to follow, but there's also often additional storyline behind it. So, for example, this department is going to have a transition and going to have a vacant position for a while as somebody leaves and somebody's filled later. And so there's money there that may be available to spend. Sometimes that money gets absorbed by the department and spent for other things in there. So knowing more about the storyline, or here's an expenditure that's not yet hit us, but we know this is coming because of some other external event. So to understand sort of what we know in terms of the radar at this point relative to what's going to happen, we think, down the road, in addition to the numbers, I think would be very instructive.
Yep.
I also think, and I'm going to pick on fire for a second, if we look at, for example, how much we're spending on vehicle repair, and looking at it by truck, right? And saying, okay, this truck's coming to end of life, we're spending a lot of money on it. If we continue down this path, then it's not going to be worth us keeping this in our fleet, and we really should be looking at a new truck. And I mean, I think that could go for a variety of different departments, but I think that's the easiest one for me to kind of think about. And if we can start looking at things like that so that we can make better long-term decisions, then I think getting into and I'm an in the weeds type person, so I probably would look for more data on this quarterly report for those types of things. Yeah.
And I think one of the things to remember too is we're coming up on some, you know, probably the next fiscal 22, fiscal 23 are going to be very difficult years for us. Capital's driving a lot of that, you know, trying to maintain some of the things we do. So there may be a balance, and I mention this only because you used that example, is that, you know, we're not going to do this new vehicle right now because really it's difficult for us to afford it, but we have to make sure we properly budget in the maintenance account. So in other words, if the vehicle is $100,000, we may not be able to cut $100,000, maybe, you know, $85,000, because we've got to make sure there's enough in maintenance to keep it going until we are able to replace it. So.
But I think, and so that's Chelsea's point flows easily into your point, which is there are probably a list of things like that that would make
Yes.
sense to be on a quarterly report.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, that'll take a little bit of work, but once it gets done, then it's gonna become formulaic,
Yep.
and it'll be part of a quarterly report.
All right.
Mhm.
But I think that, to Chelsea's point about being more granular on some of this stuff, and Sam's point about there being stories. Okay, so you're gonna see the differences, Carla's gonna look at these numbers and say, well, this is really off in that why, what was driving this number? Well, the engine had these issues and required this amount of maintenance, so hopefully those stories will bear out some of the detail that you may be looking for.
And I think, Lisa, I'm gonna jump, because
Please.
one of your other points is number 5, about liaison. When I saw that, I mean, we started this year, as part of it flowed out of our meeting last summer.
Yep.
We started having, various boards and committees and departments come in for
Yep.
reports. I mean, it just strikes me that tying those two things together, and I really, again, I found, and I think it struck me that other folks did as well, I found those incredibly useful.
Yep.
And we did it with the departments, much more so than we did with the committees.
Right.
I think it'll be kind of shocking to some of the committees, if we say, all right, we want to know what you're up to, but also incredibly informative, because we're doing a better job with our volunteers.
Yep.
But we're still, I mean, in some respects, it's like, great, you're volunteering, go, fly, I just think that having them come in and giving them not just the opportunity, the platform, all right, what are your priorities? What do you think is important in the Recreation Commission, in the rec world, in the historical world, in the open space world?
Yep.
And what are you thinking about? And so, having liaisons with different committees, I think will enhance that and make sure that we keep that communication up.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed having the different groups come to us and try and, schedule a meeting or so.
Yeah.
I don't want to go too heavy with the liaison, though. I don't want to give the impression that we're, trying to restrict their, creativity and their ability to act on their own as well. There's a bit of a fine line there. We can't be too overseeing. We do have to allow them to do what they signed up to do. But I think having them come and meet with us to discuss, the priorities for the whole group and get, have that engage in a feedback with them, I think.
Yeah, my idea for that is not just that, it is not to, you need to come to us so that we give our okay on these, but it is really to unless, someone's going off the rails, and I haven't seen too much evidence of that with our boards and committees, but more so, for them to, again, giving them a platform. I mean, maybe more people don't watch boards at the Selectmen meeting than other committees, but I'd like to think that maybe they do. But it gives them a platform for us, for folks who might be, again, when we're back in a different world, in person, but also gives us a chance to say, whoa, that's a great idea.
Yep.
We're behind you. You're not going to be operating on an island. You've got the Board of Selectmen support on this initiative. It's a great idea. I think that'd be nice.
I was looking at a broader term, Brian. I wasn't looking.
I'm not saying that you were.
Zoom has shown me is being able to go and watch all these meetings now. Like, I didn't know specifically that Youth and Families had created this YouTube show. And it was all different types of things. It wasn't just necessarily towards mental health or something along those lines. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. So it's more along those lines. I'm not asking somebody to go to a meeting and participate, but if we watched, if we each picked certain groups that we could watch, then I think that we as a board, maybe it could be just a one paragraph thing. We could say to the board, I watched this meeting and, they're working on this and this is great. Or maybe this is something, again, Zoom has been so educational for me,
Mhm.
to be able to see boards and committees. I mean, none of us have the time to go to every single board and committee meeting.
Wait a minute.
I know Sam goes to
Wait a
quite a
minute.
few, but, you know, in general, Zoom has given us the opportunity that in an evening, I can go back and watch a video that I may not have seen before. So
Yep.
we have a better understanding of what they're doing. So again, it's from a bigger picture, just so that obviously we appoint them, so just to have some idea. And there may be things, there's things that I've come up with that I thought maybe we could do better to help them. Again, it's about tools. And, so again, it was from a broader picture.
But to Brian's point also, I mean, I attend a lot of meetings, and for some of the committees that are less visible, I have consistently found that people actually are appreciative of the fact that somebody's participating, listening, and paying attention to them. So I've never had anybody say, you know, I wish you weren't here so we could do secret things or whatever. But wow, I didn't know the selectmen were interested in what's going on with this committee. And I think that's a very valuable communication channel, and you both learn and you can pass information along as well.
And again, it's about, there are so many boards and committees that are doing so many great things that we don't know about. And that's what it's about. It's about being able to help them, to give them the tools, but for us as well. I mean, again, we've all, from the different boards and committee meetings been able to watch, saw things that went, oh my gosh, you know, that's really great. Or, you know, maybe sometimes you go the other way and go, oh, I don't know about that. But again, it's us being involved and from a higher level spectrum, I guess.
And I'll comment, it's also more efficient. I don't know if folks would do this, but you find that for YouTube meetings, you can actually increase the audio playback speed by a factor of 2, and save half the time on a meeting. But you got to listen carefully, but you can actually.
I'd like to know how many people do that to me when I.
I was gonna say, are you saying there are some people you speed through, Sam?
And some people, it sounds normal, actually.
I also think that there's reports that are given out by directors to certain boards and committees that, you know, maybe they're monthly, maybe they're quarterly. I would also like to get a copy of, just to give us a synopsis of what's going on, and maybe this goes back to your packet information of them it getting posted, so at least it's out there, but I'm having a hard time finding those updates that they're giving out, and I think that there would be value.
Which goes back to the meeting packets, for example, if people are posting those
Right,
reports
yeah.
should be in those packets and available for anybody to read,
Yeah.
which is a good thing, because those reports are, again, very interesting, often very thorough, and surprising in terms of all the things that are going on.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna take it over, put a big sidebar over here, because I almost put it down on my list, but, you know, was it last year, I went to back-to-back courses trying to figure out how to use WordPress
Yeah.
to do a newsletter. Not related to this, but for something else that I wanted to do, and still may. And of course, I'm just not, I'm not there yet. You know, in terms of you sort of trolling different towns in the Commonwealth, there are a decent number of them that do for instance, a quarterly, either town or select board newsletter.
Yep.
And again, I want to think about it more, but the idea of something like that, it's not a short-term goal, but you know, maybe there's someone in the townhouse who's a lot better at WordPress than I am. Because I'm great at writing things fast, you know, but believe me, I could fill up a quarterly newsletter pretty easily. But I suspect that it's something that different committees, maybe even departments, you know, for instance, the Main Street thing, which I am going to talk about tonight. Has anybody been on Main Street today?
Fantastic. I love it.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
It's unbelievable.
Night and day.
And my second sidebar is, and it's one of the things on my list has to do with bikes. The first thing I saw when I walked down from home tonight were a bunch of kids on bikes.
Yeah.
Right, you know, and it's wide, it's safe, the bike lane isn't even in yet. You know, that's when we get to my list, we can talk about some of the ideas I got percolating around on the bike side. But it just strikes me that something like a quarterly newsletter. And again, Mark, maybe there's somebody in the townhouse who's good with WordPress, or would like to get better with WordPress.
Yeah.
Honestly, if they wanted to get better with it, I think it'd be a good expenditure of money. You can do it I did it at Assabet. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money. I'm sure there's even better courses. And
In another town that I was in, we would send out, basically a little newsletter with each tax billing. Okay, so 4 times a year, and we would reach out to the departments and say, you know, what have you either got coming up? What do you, a little article about this, that, the other thing. We tried to limit it to, 2 sides, 1 page, 2 sides, so that it didn't cost us a whole lot in the tax bill. Just an update. Here's some things that are coming up, dates you need to be aware of. Maybe there was the grant that was received by EDC for the microloans. Information on the microloans, reach out to this person, this phone number, that type of information. And it was fairly well received. The only thing that I will say is that when you start doing something, you better commit to keeping, to continue to do it, because people will expect that of you. So
Another opportunity, though, to start training people to do more electronic stuff. I would urge to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not thinking, if we sent it out with
Yeah.
tax bills, but I'm thinking, the ones I saw, I can't remember the towns, but they were, you could just access them. They were
Yep.
electronic.
yeah, and that's fine too.
So maybe, Mark, check and see if there's someone in the townhouse who is,
Sure.
either currently, I think, at least, a year ago, WordPress was the idiots,
Yeah.
program of choice,
Yeah.
for putting together a newsletter.
Yeah.
But
I think there are a couple of people, I'm not gonna out them at this point until, I don't wanna commit somebody at this point, but yeah,
WordPress?
I think there are people that.
Not that we're outing anybody.
She's not smiling behind that mask,
But just coming full circle, because then, the chair of X,
Yeah,
Yeah.
if they've got something going, then that, this next quarterly, there's
Right.
an article by them talking
Yeah.
about it.
Gives us a chance to celebrate some of the good things the boards and committees in
Yeah.
town.
And to let folks know, again, it goes back to,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a goal, and it doesn't necessarily have to be tonight, but it vexes me. How do we get, more people to volunteer in town?
Right. More information can help that, yep.
I wish I had, and I don't have great ideas, what do you do? I suspect there are people out there who would love to do it, or certainly would be willing to do it, but they don't, maybe they're not, again, if you're not from New England,
Yeah.
it's a weird thing.
It is.
New England town government is a unique creature.
Right.
So anyway, it's, again, we don't have to talk about it tonight, but it really bothers me that we don't have a better mechanism for reaching out to people. Should we do it through sports groups? Should we, all sorts of different things.
Let me suggest one quick thing. What I've done in the past is the town census, which is available electronically, actually has occupation there. So I've done sorts on occupation. If you're looking for somebody, for example, I've worked with the Historical Commission, looking for people whose job title has historical in it. And there are actually 3 or 4 people who do. And I think they've found a new member based on some of that. So,
Wow, that's
so
a good idea.
there are
There's a wizard on there, too.
600 technology people. When we did the technology committee, we went through that and found people who had IT kind of job titles there. So that's not going to work for everything, but that's a great source for some outreach that I don't think we've done very consistently.
And there is a wizard, just,
Wizard, the grand wizard,
somebody's
that's right.
job title is wizard on there. So, I'm not gonna out them, but I think that's pretty cool.
So definitely an item that I think we want to talk about more is figuring out exactly how to do a liaison type system.
Yep.
But I think everybody, again, thinks it coordinated with continuing to
Yep.
bring in the boards and committees and departments is a
Absolutely.
really good idea. Okay.
I'm gonna jump to 9 only because you kind of touched on volunteers, if
Yep.
it's okay.
Yep.
So one of the things I've thought about is how do we bring people in? I think there are people that want to serve, but they don't necessarily know what they want to do. So one of the things I thought about was trying, is like maybe a volunteer fair. You host a forum, you recruit volunteers, you publicize the missions of the boards. And if somebody has a question and thinks I might want to serve, maybe I'll go and talk to a representative from 5 different committees, and maybe I'll find a match. Again, what we're doing isn't working, so this is just another mechanism to, once we can actually meet in person again, obviously. It would give someone that may want to step forward but doesn't know what specifically would be best for them, they can actually have a conversation, pick up a piece of paper, saying, oh, what does historical do? Oh, that's in line with what I want. Or go to open space, or go to EDC even. And they say, oh, my background's more in this. Wow, I like what you're doing. I like having a conversation, a 2-minute conversation.
Do we do a big thing or anything at Heritage Day that targets volunteers?
No,
We don't. I was just gonna tweak Lisa's idea
yeah,
a little bit, just because, Vanessa and I have had this conversation. You know, how many times we're sitting there and, you know, she'll say, moderator called, looking for somebody for this.
yeah.
Any ideas, any thoughts? You know, Brian's not gonna run, you know, after 6 terms as a selectman. You know, is there anybody, that's,
Come on, Brian.
right? So, you know, is there somebody, you know, the things like that. So there are some towns and everything that have volunteer committees, and that is their job. It sounds kind of weird, because we have trouble filling committees, but it's a volunteer committee that basically is like, okay, historical's looking for a person. You know, these are people that we're aware of that, you know, it's almost like Sam's idea kind of
Yeah.
extrapolated. We've gone through and we've looked at these people and figured out, these are people we'll reach out to about the vacancies that exist for these things, and try to bring you candidates, you know, for consideration based on what you're looking for. It's an interesting approach, and
Yeah.
Southborough, of all the communities I've served in, Southborough is probably the best one for people wanting to serve. Sometimes those people then want to get paid, but a lot of volunteerism. And I really think that's, you know, that a committee like that, that's able to kind of do the legwork for you to say, yeah, I've got these 2 or 3 people that might fit what you're looking for, you should meet with them, type of thing. So it
That's
just
not a
provides
bad
you a
idea.
resource. Well, it might work better than a fair, but you've got to get the right people.
Try both.
Yeah. You know, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
I think there are people in town that have done a great job of reaching out
Absolutely,
and making direct contact to people.
Yeah.
yep.
No more so than
Yeah.
the person who's named for the roadway right behind us here. I think
Yeah.
Mr. Wilson has made it a point to get to know so many people,
Yeah.
and would, you know, have an idea where that person would fit
Yep,
great, and reach out. I
Yeah.
think Jim Hegarty does the same thing.
yeah,
But look at this board. You know, don't take this the wrong way, but most of you are recycled, right? You've been on other boards, other committees, done other things, and after you're done with this, you may end up on another board, on another committee. You know, it's the same people who just seem to move from committee to committee, and it's very difficult to get the new people, you know, in and to get them ingrained in some of these, you know, smaller boards and committees, to prepare them to be, you know, to take some of these bigger spots when they become available.
I do think this type of environment, though, with the flexible, you know, participation, does make it easier for people. So, you know, depending on how long we're kind of in this, and, you know, I think travel is down for people, so maybe, you know, work-life balance is a little bit different. I think it's
Yep.
probably shifted to more family-focused, but, I think this is more conducive to, you know, somebody with kids,
yep.
being
able to participate, so maybe we just need to.
But as Marty said, you know, it doesn't matter if you travel, right? Because if
Right.
we're gonna continue, if some of this,
Exactly.
some boards and committees are gonna continue in this environment, you know,
Mhm.
in perpetuity, so to speak,
Mhm.
more often than not,
Right.
it doesn't matter if you're in Chicago and everything in that, you know, if you can make yourself available and you have all the, you know, the materials for the
Mhm.
meeting and that, you can participate, you can be an active member.
But that raises the question, can we continue to do this? That gets back to state regulations and so forth in terms of remote participation, which would be an interesting thing.
That's gonna be fascinating. I will be amazed if there isn't pressure to, you know,
Yeah.
sort of an acknowledgement, in the same way that, that teleworking is gonna become a much
Yeah.
bigger deal than
Yeah.
it used to be, when all of a
Yeah.
sudden, people both companies
Yeah.
are realizing that, hey, we don't need as much space,
Yeah.
and people are realizing, you know what? I don't have to get up at 5:30 in the morning, I can get up at 7 in the morning,
Yeah.
because all I'm doing is walking downstairs.
Yep.
So, I will be very surprised if there's not an acknowledgement at the state level,
Yeah.
but you know what? You can have open meetings
Yep,
Remote-
Yeah.
remotely.
and it's
Yeah.
worked here in Southborough, and I think it's been successful. I have heard so many positive comments. People that typically wouldn't go to a board or committee meeting are now actually watching them. And I'm getting a lot of really positive feedback
Yep.
on, you know, committees that normally people may not have gone to in the past. They're actually watching their meetings now. And I think, again, it's about getting the public more interested in participating, and I think this is a key in how to do that. There's a whole new base of people that we haven't touched that are watching meetings, because
And not to get too far afield, but from a financial perspective, that's gonna change our model. Because, you know, we'll see a drop in personal property tax revenue. You know, from businesses and things like that too. You know, we may not see as much of, you know, some of the white collar businesses, you know, that we have on Route 9.
Or we may see more of them.
Or you may
Lot of-
see, yeah, like
lot
I
of
said, I
sharing
mean,
space,
it'll
I
be,
think.
it is gonna be
Yeah.
interesting to see what sticks from what we're doing now and what reverts back, and then what, you know, what is new. So, yeah, it's gonna be a very interesting time.
Well, that, again, one of my items has to do with business communications and development.
Yep.
And the people who know best about what's likely to happen in that area are the folks who are out there.
Yep.
And I really want to make a push towards, sitting down and talking with them.
Yeah.
You know, at roundtables or something like
Yep.
that. You know, we've got a really, I hope he stays on EDC, John Wood.
Yes,
Is,
so far.
man, he's a bundle of energy and
He is.
ideas, and, you know, tying in some efforts like that along, again, I'm jumping ahead because I happen to know what's on my list.
Well, I think a couple of mine have come off. So number 8, we've talked about training and outreach already, so I'm gonna take 8 off. 6 is just brief. I would hope that maybe going forward, we could make sure our list of goals are included in every packet for the Board of Selectmen's meetings. So it's like a running opportunity for citizens and whatnot, either that or potentially on the website. And I'd like to potentially see, as we work on things, of the list that we come up with, have a line item. I would imagine most times, there's gonna be no discussion, but maybe, say Chelsea and I worked on something, it gives us the opportunity under a line item, with it being in the packet, the goals are still forefront. We can say, hey, we did this, you know, go look on whatever, or we'll contribute it, or Sam may say one of his things. But I think in the majority of times, there's not gonna be a whole lot. It's not gonna be an every meeting thing.
Yeah.
But it would just be good to keep it fresh in our packet as well when it stays
It's actually something I did last year after we had our meeting.
Yes.
Was I just created a sheet.
Yep.
You know, from the minutes of the meeting, you know, identifying all the goals, and just tried to keep a running tally of it. Always
Yep.
keep it in mind that we need to, you know, be tackling something, and just kind of do a cross-off, just so I could see some progress on it.
Yeah.
Well, sort
List,
of merging those together, Mark, why don't we plan on every agenda, number one, to include in the packet, the page or two, just the
Mhm.
bullet points of the
Yep.
various items.
Yep.
And include on the agenda at every meeting, and the answer may be nothing today,
Exactly.
but just a goals update. And it'll be very simple. Does anybody have any updates on any of these things? And if the answer is no, then fine, we just move on to whatever the next item is. But again, make it part of our process.
Yep.
If you have that list, if you have the list of the goals, so in my mind, you know, you've got the big goal, and then you've got all the smaller, you know, a dozen sub-goals under each of it. You know, that basically, as they're done, the sub-goals are done, moving towards achieving the larger goal, things can just be checked off, so it's almost like a living document,
Mhm.
you know, that you, you know, can basically have in every packet, you know, and so, you know, board members, public, you know, everybody can take a look, here's what we've set out to do, and here's where we are, you know, with these things, and if we haven't moved on these things, why haven't we moved?
Mhm.
And do we need to look at this a little differently to get there, or, you know, have we kind of determined that this is no longer as important as we thought it was 6 months ago?
So 2 things, it'll be in the packet,
Perfect.
and it'll be on the agenda.
Done.
So
Good.
I would also add a formal review quarterly to address Mark's point. Because if we just say there's no update and we move on, then we're gonna lose sight of holding ourselves accountable to make sure that we are on track for the end of the year. So I'd like to see us at least quarterly, or maybe just quarterly, review every goal and just say, we're on track, we're not, do we need help, and kind of what we're at with it.
And meeting, we have our numbers review.
Good idea,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, exactly, that's great, and then you could have Aldo come in at the same time and do the legal review.
Yep.
It could be a review meeting.
Yep.
You know? Okay, so that one's great. Handbook, we've kind of touched on this already. I would, again, be happy to kind of, work with Mark and Vanessa and try to come up with, kind of just some ideas and some drafts to discuss with the board and work towards putting something together. This is something that's been on for the whole time I've been on the board, I think, Brian. I don't know how long it goes back.
This is number 7?
Yeah,
Okay.
number 7.
We've had employee handbook discussions. Aldo has opined that that's a legal liability, which I find hard to believe. I mean, many towns have these. I find my own employees really value having an employee handbook that lays out, basic policies, expectations, and so forth.
Westboro has a very good
Yeah.
example.
If Vanessa was
has a
here,
good one, too.
she's got more history than I do, so we did have one.
Yeah.
And then I believe that, the accuracy of comment from council, from Aldo, was, that there were liability in that, so it went away.
Yeah. I would like to revisit that.
I
at some
agree.
point, yeah.
I'd be happy to kind of work towards bringing something to the board, comparing some other towns, working with Mark and Vanessa. And again, another board member, please jump in as well. I would just like to see that. That's been on the list for a long time, and I think it's only beneficial for the employees, and again, it comes to the policies. A lot of those policies fit right in to this handbook as well. So as we're updating one, we
Right.
could do both simultaneously.
Now, this is something I think that is gonna have to be done, hand in hand with personnel board to some degree, because they're gonna
Agreed.
feel some sense of ownership or responsibility.
Happy to spearhead that conversation.
So, and I think that probably since it's employee, Aldo probably is gonna would punt this to Labor Council.
Yep.
Because at any time it's anything of an employee or something like that nature, and that, it's usually, that's the way it goes, so.
And other towns have done it, so the bones are out there to do this. It's
Yeah,
just a
and we
matter
have
of
some
tweaking it
samples,
and
Vanessa has some samples that,
Perfect.
again, didn't go any further than the collection stage.
We can work together to come up with something to present with the
Yeah.
board,
Yeah,
down
I
the
can
road.
understand the notion that you need to be, aware of what you're potentially putting in a
Careful,
handbook.
yeah.
I get that,
Yeah,
but the idea that you wouldn't have a handbook because of legal concerns just doesn't, that's not resonating at all with me.
Well, the experience of other towns who have them, they're not.
Well, not just other towns, every business has got one.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly. It gives you guidance, and that's kind of a lot of my points where it's, if we give people the tools and the resources they need, it makes our job and it makes everybody else's job a lot easier. And you can always go back. I do this all the time. I constantly go back and reference something or look for something somewhere just for guidance. And again, it's just another tool. So I'd be happy to work with Mark, Vanessa, if another member wants to be involved as well. Happy to have somebody, happy to talk to personnel and come up with something that works for employees and volunteers.
Structurally, process-wise, based on our experience with the pilot committee, it seems to me it makes sense to have one designee for a topic to follow up like that, as opposed to having multiple of us
Okay.
who might get in trouble with open meeting law and all that kind of stuff. So
Right.
I
That's
think
fine.
that doesn't stop us from consulting with others on specific issues maybe, but to have a point person
Okay,
for
I
these
would
things
be
seems to
happy
me.
to work on this unless somebody else wants to jump right in. But I would be happy to and bring something to the board, in the fall.
Great.
Good.
And so that leads me to my last point, and it's very simple. I had asked for job descriptions for selectmen, employees. Mark was great to provide them to me, but I noticed some of them are older. I know Vanessa's was recently done, but I think Lori Esposito's is from 2012. I would imagine there's been some evolution. Mark, you could probably answer that better. I just think it's always good to have an updated job description. So, very brief point, and
How many, what numbers are we talking about? How many employees?
like, under the Board of Selectmen, it's only 3.
Well, Board of Selectmen's office is 3, and then
Right.
you've got,
But then the other direct reports,
Yes,
got
the
department heads that do,
Yeah.
that I oversee on a day-to-day basis that are appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
But how
Their-
many,
I'd
Their
like to see
their
the-
descriptions will be in their contracts.
if they have a
If they
contract.
have.
No, most of them don't have
But
contracts.
some of them may have already been done, Mark, like Vanessa's was done not that long ago because it was done through the consultant for the personnel board. So
Right.
we may find some of these are current, I worry when it's 8 years later, and I would imagine, and I'll just use Lori as an instance because I have hers, her flow has changed. And, I'm sure Carol, I don't know when the last time that position, a job description was done. It's not something that it has to be done, though, I just like it to be on the radar.
One
We've
place.
done reviews, Personnel Board is doing it now that, anniversary dates are the same and reviews are the same.
Okay.
So, and that has just taken place, right? So, we
Yes.
have time to do this, it's not something that has to be done today, tomorrow, but maybe,
Yeah, redoing a job description is a bit of a process simply because it gets done, it goes to personnel board, usually takes a couple of meetings, so it's probably, from the time that, and this board would have to then probably, approve of that first
yep,
before it goes to personnel board, so you're probably talking, 3 or 4 months, by the time it actually gets done.
I was thinking if we could accomplish this in the next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not necessarily tighten this time frame too
Yeah.
much, but give time to get done. There's analysis involved in this as well, seeing who's really updated. I don't know necessarily that all of them have to change. Some are fairly consistent with
Well, so with
department
the pay, remember, when personnel board did the, excuse me, the pay and class review,
yeah,
which was done, God, I think it might be 5 years now.
Yeah, several years ago.
I was gonna say it's 5 years now. That was something that was done, is they went through and looked at all the job descriptions and, got the employees' feedback. Is this accurate? Is this, and there were some tweaks and everything that were made at that time. So,
Well,
from.
one thing, what it sounds like is that one of the early boards that we should have come in and talk to us is the personnel board.
yeah,
Right.
Because so many of these items fall
Yeah.
right into their
absolutely.
bailiwick
Yeah.
and say, this is what we're thinking about. Have you guys thought about this? Is this something that you've
Yeah.
got, a draft of, or you've done some
Yeah.
things like this, and maybe we can entice them to do some,
Great
not heavy
collaborative.
lifting, some lifting.
Great collaborative effort. Yeah.
And Lisa, I assume you're talking about, again, not just the 3 or 4 people in the selectman's office, but department heads, because I'm interested in seeing, the department heads, everybody who basically reports directly to Mark, and therefore to us, seems to me to be a useful group to look at and have in one place, so if there's a question about it, we can see those things.
And, and again, jobs evolve. A lot of our townhouse employees have been with us a long amount of time. So as positions evolve, or, again, it's just for the purpose of having an updated description. It's not looking to, increase, pay or anything, but I think to have the most current updated, you would have to probably do something like that along the lines if somebody retired or somebody left anyway.
Mhm.
You would do some form of updating.
Yeah.
So this just takes out a piece. If somebody leaves, you have it, it's done, it's easy to look up.
Actually, Lisa, if you think about the townhouse, we've done a lot of turnover
I know,
in the last 2 years. So we've had some employees that may have been with us for a while that have gone from department to department, but, look at planning, look at accounting, look at treasurer's office, minus the finance director. We've had some, the clerk's office has seen a good amount of turnover and everything, as well, the assessor's office.
so this might be easier than we think.
So, yeah.
Okay, so that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Well, 1 down, 4 to go, 1:30 a.m. is my
Yeah,
projection.
is that the projected time?
I have my Mountain Dew, I'm good to go. I'm good for another 3 hours, so.
Sophie, is this yours?
No.
She's the last page.
She's the last
I'm
page.
last.
Meeting law.
I'm sideways.
She's sideways.
What is it? I think it's the same one.
Oh, is it?
Is the, under goal, is it regular review?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we're looking at this, I
Yeah.
printed it.
Oh, okay. I didn't
Got
know
it.
you, I didn't
Okay.
I
know
don't print anything in landscape.
So luckily, some of these we've kind of already checked off. So the first one that's new is, looking into regional dispatch to be hosted by Southborough. So, this is one I put on here. It's not necessarily going to increase revenue, but it could decrease, some of our expenses in the dispatch. And I think, one thing that, I'd like to see Chief Paulus do this year with his budget is split it out between police and dispatch. Historically, it's been combined. And I think, given the climate that we're in today, I think it does make sense to see if there's any opportunity to regionalize here in Southborough and have some other towns take part in the expense of that. And we just built a building that can sustain that.
Well, when I met with Chief Paulus, back in the fall, and he started, at least to me, talking about the additional police officers that he wanted, he started talking about the public safety review that had been done, it's like 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, and I gave him a bit of a hard time about it, in a good way, because from staffing levels particularly, some equipment levels, but both the fire department and the police department have pointed to that study, wanting to be up to, perfectly legitimately, up to the recommended standardized staffing levels, et cetera. I don't know if anybody's ever looked at that report. There's a second very big part of that report that's exactly what Chelsea is talking about. And that is that the sort of flip side of additional staffing, et cetera, is regionalization.
Yeah.
And that's kind of gotten lost.
Yeah.
So something like this is, and you're right, I'm not sure there's another facility like this around.
Yeah.
So it's a real,
Right.
drawing card for that sort of an approach. I think it's a great idea.
And it doesn't have to be a town right next to us either. And then I think you're also cutting down on, dispatch to dispatch, and so that you can gain some efficiencies with mutual aid and that kind of thing too, where you're not having to tone out to another town and it's coming through here. And I'm certainly not an expert in this. I think it's worth looking into, and
have you had discussions with either chief about it?
I have mentioned it to both of them.
Okay.
Yes, when I was on advisory.
And it's been discussed by advisory when I was on, 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, but I do think that it makes sense for us to look at it, especially this year. And, if another town or community is in the process of looking at building a new public safety facility, and they could save some square footage, they may be looking to do that right now.
So what do you think makes the most sense, to task someone like you, for instance, to?
I'd be happy to do it.
Okay.
I second
that. Great idea. But I would certainly rely heavily on the chiefs.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
not just for the expertise, but also, I'd like to think that they would buy into the idea of doing that.
Yeah.
And you might point them to the public safety study that was done.
Yeah.
That talked about the importance of regionalization as well as their staffing levels.
Yeah.
I think every chief is interested in the proposal if you're hosting.
Yeah.
Okay, because I've been involved in one of these studies in trying to regionalize fire in another community, and it is so difficult. As to, okay, so where is the station going to go? How is it going to serve, this and that. Dispatch is a little bit different. Again, the biggest issue is if it's not in your town, what is your FaceTime with the person who is standing at the window, who needs help, who needs assistance, how is that, how is talking to a video monitor going to, or are you going to staff it, or... That's always the biggest question as to how that piece of it works, the customer service piece of it in the communities that don't host. And, if you're operating, a lot of the dispatchers and that are done, they monitor the jail cells. Okay, so if they're not doing the monitoring, now you're paying a police officer at their overtime rate and everything in that to do something like that. So there's a bunch of different considerations. I'm not being negative. I'm just saying there's a lot of layers to peel away, in that type of discussion. It's obviously easier, again, I think if you went to the chiefs and you said, would you be interested in this, the answer may be if we're hosting, I'm willing to entertain it, but do we want another town handling our dispatch?
I'm not suggesting that
Right,
we
right.
go outside of self, I'm suggesting we host it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
You
suggest
just
it.
gotta find, you've gotta find a dance
gotta-
partner or the dance partners.
Correct, and the chiefs are part of, groups regionally that
Yeah.
they can reach out to see if there's any interest, I think Neshoba has regional dispatch.
Yeah, it does work out there, and so I think
Got
we
it.
can look at those that work
Yeah.
and ask, how did they handle the issues
Yeah.
that people are concerned about?
It's a worthy discussion.
It can work, yeah, it's always worth asking the question.
Yeah.
The pitch to other towns is to say,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's.
well, and I think in this environment,
Yeah,
there's value to that, right? And so I know it's not a revenue generator for us, but it would be an offset to expense.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Um,
Marty, remember how you said that we're unique in terms of how we do things in government? People come in here and they're like, I don't understand how you do this. What is it, stone walls make good neighbors? And that's how a lot of people are in terms of New England and stuff like that. So it's difficult to people say they want to do regional and they want to do these things and collaborate and do that, but it's difficult to pull the trigger on them.
Oh, I mean, you go to other parts of the country and they're,
It's easy.
well, they're baffled, it's easy,
Yeah.
it's a given. They're
Yeah.
baffled with the idea that why would each town have its own,
These services are provided countywide.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah, so.
Okay, next one, define BOS involvement with employee goals and performance reviews, including completion of any outstanding reviews for employees reporting to BOS. So this does kind of piggyback off of Lisa's with the job description. I think we should figure out how we kind of flow down goals to the people who report into BOS or appointed by BOS, and also look at their reviews and how they're performing to those goals, and make sure their job descriptions fit within the goals. So I think they're kind of together. So I think,
yeah, I think that's a great idea. And again, Mark, we don't need an explanation tonight, but I don't want to lard everything into a quarterly meeting, but everything gets done more regularly if it's part of a regular, calendaring.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there, for the various people whose reviews you're responsible for, is everybody on the same cycle for that? In other words, are those reviews all done at the end of the calendar year, end of fiscal year, or do some get done in a first quarter? How does that work?
Yeah, so if you're non-union and SAP employees, with the change in the bylaw that just happened in June at town meeting, all employees now are getting their reviews done July 1st. Okay, so everybody now used to be, all over the map during the year. All reviews now are happening on July 1st. The only difference to that is going to be any contract employee that I'm involved with their review. So that'll happen as their contract, as their contract year changes.
Okay, so that's starting this year.
Yes.
All right, so Chelsea, how does that fit with, is your idea then that we would be involved in after, I guess the simplest thing is before July 1st or after July 1st?
so I guess I'm not super familiar with what currently happens, but what I was thinking is, as personnel board has to sign off on reviews, so do we, and do they make changes?
No.
So I think.
Personnel board has to approve the increases.
Okay,
So personnel board so one of the things that personnel board used to see the entire reviews, the entire review was public, and Labor Council had said, that's just, you can't have that. The entire evaluations are not supposed to be public. They're supposed to be confidential. So they get the cover sheets for everything in that, but the chair.
By they, you mean the personnel board?
The personnel board, but the chair, so that is public, the cover sheet is, but the chair will review the entire document, just to make sure that there's no issues with consistency, or any inconsistencies.
So for purposes of the new system that's been approved by town meeting,
Yeah.
presumably that means the personnel board will get those materials to review, I'm assuming at least a month before July 1? Is that the?
Yeah, in a perfect world, they'll get them early enough to take, to review, because, again, it's all happening at once. So they're all happening, in the same meeting.
All right, and Chelsea,
So
if I'm heading in a direction different than what you.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you're describing is are you becoming aware of those same reviews at least at the same time the personnel board does? Or am I?
That, and, I mean, in my mind, we should also have input into the review,
Okay,
especially if it's somebody that we either appoint or reports in to. And so that would be for the SAP employees. For the contract employees, I think we're the ones that are negotiating those contracts, right? So I think we absolutely need to have the input into those, so that we can so that we're aware of, goals, were those met for this year, evaluate on those goals, and then we are better prepared to have those contract negotiations.
okay. So I guess, Mark, this necessarily falls to you to come up with a plan for us being able to do that.
So, if you're going to do it as a board, there's going to be a lot of executive sessions. If you're going to...
One long executive session.
Well, no, because if you're going to have, when contract employees come up, they happen at different times during the year. So, I guess we kind of need to talk about how you want to do this. If the board is going to comment on, wants to have board comment on every employee to the granular point. So if we're talking, the board does a contract for Brian Ballantyne. So the board would like to have input on his review. Does the board then want to have input onto the employees that work in the treasurer's office? Are we going down another level, which is, the responsibility of the finance director to do the review? So I guess...
So does Brian do his?
Brian does the reviews for his employees, yes.
And you sign off on them?
Yes.
I'd like to see those. I'm not necessarily
Yeah,
eager to
Yeah, I think that's
be
right.
involved,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I would add too, though, I think there's an interesting dimension, Mark. I'm not aware of exactly how this works, but I think there's a useful input from the customers of folks. In other words, not only we take a look at this, but in fact, these individuals interact with other people out there, like other department heads. I think it's useful to have the opportunity for those who work with individuals here to be able to opine on, their experience in that process somehow. I don't think of that as being actively pursued now from what I've anecdotally heard around, but at least that's what I do in my day job in terms of looking not only my experience with somebody, but let's talk to people who actually work with them on a day-to-day basis, who depend on them to do things for them, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, again, this is why, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
I was just saying, I see plus and minuses to that, Sam. I would more depend on the department head to know how they're interacting. Depending on who you ask, not everybody always gets along with each other.
Oh, I understand that, yeah.
Someone may, again, in any, even in public sector, sometimes there's cliquey groups.
Sure.
And I would just worry where it's you're basing somebody's review. And again, for me, it's a level of confidence in your department heads. I certainly would like to see them, and I support that wholeheartedly. I think we should have the ability to see them. I worry about having peers, townhouse peers, being involved in a review of another.
Well, you got to weight that appropriately and understand that there's potential for that, and listen and try to figure out how that matches with what you've heard from other places.
Well, Mark,
Yeah,
I think
longer conversation.
I think I'm going to kick this back to Mark and maybe come up with an idea of who would fall into the category of folks it makes sense for us to have input in the review. Because I agree with your point. Having input for Brian Ballantyne, who we deal with on a regular basis, makes all the sense in the world. relying on Brian and yourself for the folks in the treasurer's office, or the accountant's office,
Right.
or DPW.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to understand how, how far down we wanted to go, because, there may be somebody that Chelsea really wants to see, because she's got some comments, she's got some input. But then there are other people that, I really don't know that person, I really don't have any. If you're gonna do something like this, you've got to go either all the way down the rabbit hole or no way down the rabbit hole.
I think we start at the first level and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And then, it depends.
But
on
then
the
seeing
experience.
the reviews, because, for instance, one of the things that that goes into whether or not someone is a good manager of their
Sure.
department is, are they doing good reviews of people?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so just seeing those without having input, I think would be valuable.
Right.
So again, I think it makes sense for you to come up with a, and I guess it'd be interesting to see, maybe it already exists, but this would lend itself, if it doesn't already exist, to, Brian, and then who his direct reports are.
Sure.
Karen, then who
Yeah.
and then we'll,
Yeah.
and then as we're, in terms of the folks below the department heads, I don't think we need to see those
Yeah.
before July 1. We
Yeah.
just need to see them at some point.
Yeah.
Now, they may raise some questions going forward, but, let's start off with
Yeah.
some, bites that we can chew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then see if, I have a feeling it's gonna make
Yeah.
perfect sense. Does
So
that
yeah.
make sense to come up with
It
something
does
like that?
make sense, and I think
I
that
agree.
and I've had this conversation, I think, with a couple of you, I know I've had it with Sam. When it comes to the contract employees, they don't use the standard form that the SAP employees do. I like to have something a little more free-flowing with them, which basically is, tell me about your year, tell me what went right, tell me what didn't, what were some of the issues that you had that you overcame, where were you with your goals, what you got done, what you didn't, talk about that, and then what are you looking, talk about your next year. What are you looking to do, how are you looking to, which gives, and I get an awful lot out of that. Now, some of those I do verbally, and some of those I do in writing. And sometimes it depends on the year. I think there are sometimes, there may be things that you want to commit to writing. But, if I'm talking with Chief Paulus, 5-6 times a week, I'm continually going back and forth, you did this, you did a great job with this, you did this, maybe you want to think about pivoting here or doing something, so, I guess what I'm saying is, it depends on the person, and there hasn't been, in my mind, there hasn't been, the consistency of committing everybody to writing, or everybody's done as a verbal, type of thing, and obviously.
I think there's value, though, in having at least a baseline written record
Yeah.
in the employee file. Not that everybody, has to have 100 pages written, but some sort of summary
Right.
that goes over the kind of points that you've talked about there as a reference point, particularly if something eventually goes bad with somebody, then having that record, whether it's good or bad in there, and an accurate rendition of, this was an issue 2 years ago that we touched on, and it went away for a while and came back or whatever. I think that's very valuable in my own experience of having some form of written record there, so.
And for me, another point is why I think this is good is, there are things that when the townhouse was open, I may go to Vanessa or I may go to Lori, and I may ask them to work on something for me or do something for me that Mark may not necessarily be aware of. If we're not involved in some level with at least the Selectmen's office, when their review time comes, unless we're somewhat involved, Mark may not know the list of things that Lori or Vanessa may have worked on for me, or even Carol. So again, I think that's a positive to this as well.
Yep, I agree. All right, so that's in your lap.
Sure.
Okay, act as liaison for town departments related to ops and budget, evaluate services, provided to residents. So, this one I put down partly because of the process that we went through with the 0 and 2% cuts with the budget after COVID, and kind of, from an advisory perspective, was we were concerned with taking anything out of the budget that was going to cut services to residents. So, I thought that it was important for and maybe liaison isn't the right word, but, kind of keeping tabs on what those departments are working on, and are we providing for the residents, what we should be providing to them? And I think the other piece of that goes to the quarterly report for the budget item that we talked about before. So maybe this kind of goes hand in hand as we're looking at the numbers and the story, Sam, that you were talking about. Maybe that's kind of where this fits in, and it doesn't have to be a point of contact. But I liked having a liaison role with advisory, and found it helpful to know if somebody was trending in the red or not, and kind of getting the heads up about that rather than at the end of the year.
Yep.
I just think we need to be careful, going back to something that Marty said,
Mhm.
is we're not gonna micromanage the departments.
Mhm.
You know, we hire department heads to manage a department, to do things in that, and,
Mhm.
you know, you wanna make sure that they don't feel someone standing over their shoulder saying, why are you doing that? Why aren't we doing it this way? Why aren't we, you know, there's times and places for those conversations, but that's my only caution with that.
Mhm.
So I think if it's done the right way, it can be helpful in terms of evaluating our services and everything in that, but, you know, we just, you know, we don't want departments to feel that, I don't know if this is the right thing to do because somebody may think, you know,
Yeah,
think otherwise.
I think my point, though, was to create an open dialogue
Yeah.
with them, and to not feel like they have to do this big presentation for us
Right.
on a whatever basis, and that, you know, that we're open to hearing from what they're working on, and then maybe during the members' report, we can just say something quick about, you know, fire's doing this, you know, if anybody's interested, or whatever they're working on. I would like to see us be more open, to hearing from them.
Oh, I
Do you
completely
view
agree.
this as different than what advisory does? It sounds like it's the same thing that advisory does. They have a liaison that doesn't micromanage, but kind of asks questions and oversees and kind of comes back. Is this along those same lines, Chelsea?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand.
And I also think it's advocating for them, right? And I think, at least for the departments that I was assigned to, I felt like I could articulate to the rest of the committee what they were looking to do and why something made sense, right? And there were other people on advisory who would speak for the departments that they were assigned to. So I just felt like it was a different level of understanding that not all five of us need to
Right.
get into the weeds on, right?
But I think with that 0%, 2%
Yeah.
exercise that you did, I don't necessarily agree with how that was approached by advisory, because we gave the departments, you know, you understand your department and your operation better than anybody. You tell me where you need to make the cuts, which will have the least amount of impact on your services.
Right.
And then to have advisory say, well, we don't agree with what you're cutting. We think you should cut here instead. I mean, that just kind
I
of.
think it was more to understand what was getting cut out of, but,
Could this tie in, Chelsea, with the quarterly, like you mentioned at the beginning? Is there a way to tie this in with the, you know, the quarterly report that we're looking for on the budget now? You know,
yes, I think it does.
okay,
I think
so
it does.
how,
I'm trying to think if there's a hybrid somewhere that, because I know, and what you described with advisory is similar to what we did back in the day.
Yeah.
And, you know, somebody be assigned to youth and family services and somebody would be assigned to
Yeah.
recreation.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you would end up you had to be a little bit careful, you know, because you could end up you know, the agency captured, and all of a sudden you're advocating for recreation. It's like, wait a minute, no, I'm supposed to be, you know.
Right.
But if we're gonna have them do a quarterly report, and we are gonna have various departments come in, I'm just trying to think if in addition to that, we need somebody assigned to also be communicating with them. I'm not convinced that we do. In other words, if we're doing those two things, if we're getting a quarterly report that sees what the flow of their money is, and we are bringing in, granted, it's not gonna be quarterly, but we're bringing in, presumably in the first half of the year, if we're bringing in DPW, and we're bringing in the recreation department, and we're bringing in, fire, and we're bringing in police, just to see where things are, what you've got coming up and everything like that, to talk to all of us. Do we need the additional of Chelsea also communicating, one-to-one with the police chief, and then doing a report back to us? Now, maybe we do.
So I found a lot of value in that, in having those conversations.
Yeah.
To keep a pulse of the departments, right? And not from a micromanagement perspective, more of, is there anything we should be aware of that's coming our way that we need a heads up on, and maybe not necessarily have them do a formal report on that.
Okay.
I think that's where I found the value. And also to open the lines of communication, right? And not make it seem like they can only come talk to us when they're scheduled for that quarterly report, right?
That's what I'm for.
Well, I guess it's something that I found value in being
Yeah.
involved
Oh,
with,
no,
right?
and yeah.
We all will have a different perspective on whatever comes up.
I agree with you, Chelsea. I did that as an advisory member. I found it very helpful to have that informal relationship with the various departments there. And I don't think they viewed it as micromanagement necessarily, and seemed to, again, appreciate the opportunity to articulate their story and sort of practice in terms of what they were going to do with the Selectmen advisory during the budget process. So.
And as a board member, I know and I'm sure most of us have that have been on the board, I go and ask a question. If I have a question to ask, I go to Mark, or I go with the department heads. I don't have necessarily an issue. I mean, I typically get the detailed budget anyway, and kind of nitpick through it, and not afraid to ask a bunch of questions.
Review carefully.
So, I think it's a good idea. I just don't know how we incorporate it into, I still like the quarterly reports and finding a way to do this.
Can we do this? Because we're going to meet again on this.
Yeah.
How many, I'll call them entities, how many entities would we be talking about? In other words, what would be, obviously DPW, police, fire are easy.
Yeah.
Youth and Family Services, I guess senior. Rec, that's 6. Who else?
Library. I think you'd like to see library.
Yeah,
Library,
EDC.
EDC.
Yeah.
And again, as a tool to not just, to know what maybe we can do also to help them move forward to achieve, their charge, their goals.
Or even just be a sounding board for them, right?
No.
They want to talk about something, and I know that they do this with Mark. But I would like to play that role too. And I think sometimes you could come up with something that they haven't thought of before, maybe, or they bring an idea to you and say, so I'm thinking about for Ryan, for example, the library. Obviously, they're thinking outside, or Tim Davis with Rec, thinking outside the box. I just want to run this idea past you. I just, I don't know. I mean, I'm new, right, to the board. I don't know that Tim would call me and ask me a question. I think I just want to show that we're open to that dialogue.
Okay, well, let's do, for the next time we sit down and talk about this, let's get a list.
Yeah.
Because there's 5 of us. So if there's 15 entities, only 5 or 6 of them are going to be large entities. Right. And, see what it would look like with maybe everybody having 3 that they were responsible for. And my guess is, other than them reaching out to you, you're probably going to have maybe 1 or 2 conversations a quarter.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
And this kind of ties in with one of the things that I had about, I use liaison as a word too, and knowing what they're working on, and so it's kind of along the same line.
Yeah.
This could be tied in with that as well.
And Marty, one for me, the 500-pound gorilla here is the schools. 2/3 of the budget, and I think a huge part of what makes Southborough special and important going forward. And I think that historically, I don't believe there's been enough sort of active communication there, but Mark certainly works closely with him on the budget side of things, but I think that it would be very helpful to find a way to be more active in what's going on in terms of schools and planning and so forth. So
I
hope we
agree,
find
and
a way
Chelsea's got a son going into the school,
Yeah.
so she has a vested interest.
Yeah.
I think from information-wise, then, that's fine, but I think, I'll just say this because it's on the record, and I think it's important. I've been here almost 8 years, and I've had nothing but a collaborative relationship, which I think is, I'm just saying,
I'm not
which I think
suggesting
is,
it is, yeah.
I understand, but which is reflected, in the budget.
Yep.
Yep.
And everything, the school has really been a partner. I don't think we'd be sitting in this building right now if the school hadn't,
Right.
decided to, make sure that they had nothing big come up,
Yeah.
during this project.
Absolutely, and I'm suggesting it's important because the school system is a huge asset for the town. I think it's
Yeah.
important to find ways
Yeah.
to leverage that more even than we have already, so.
Yeah.
To me,
Yeah,
that's a
and we
big-
continue to have those discussions, and like I said, I think there's a couple of things that hopefully, there'll be some traction on, in the next 12 to 18 months, with the school, that we can continue to, find synergies that, can eliminate maybe some duplications of things.
Yeah, no, my experience for a long time has been that particularly the Southborough schools are terrific. And, they were terrific before, and I think Roger Challen now is the new chair.
Yeah.
He is.
They're gonna be more terrific.
Yeah.
So in terms of having a dialogue, I mean, that's what Roger's all about.
Absolutely.
And I've gone to a lot of meetings.
And I'm not, and Mark, I mean, you shouldn't, it's just that, we've got,
Yeah.
at some point, there's gonna be a 4-school, 3-school discussion. I don't know how that's gonna come out. but
I agree.
That discussion is gonna be held. One of the things that I had a conversation with Kathy Cook today about, a variety of different things from an advisory standpoint, and, what to do from a next capital project standpoint, which
Sure.
may or may not be, the focus of a community center, that it may or may not be that. Well, the schools could play a big role in that, as quite frankly could the private schools,
Yeah.
in terms of discussion and things like that. And so, getting those people at the table and getting them
Yeah.
used to being at the table with, man, I've been watching the capital planning,
Mhm.
boy, geez, if we made one really, really good decision
Yep,
in
yep.
fiscal year 20,
Yeah.
it was reinvigorating that committee,
Yeah.
because those folks have been terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, between ourselves, advisory, capital planning, and again, the schools have been great, and
Sure.
they're even gonna be better. Because you're absolutely right, we've got some tough budget decisions and hurdles that we're gonna be having to confront in the next couple of years, and having everybody at the table is gonna be really important for that.
So one of the, so think about over the past, 12 to 18 months, the town has eliminated 3 of your oldest buildings, the police station, the fire station, and Fayetteville Hall,
Yeah.
and replaced it with a brand-new facility. And I know that, if you've watched the capital meetings, then you know, that they're looking at the next domino, which would be South Union School. And, what could happen with that? I think, that capital is gonna be coming to the Selectmen at some point in the next couple of months and asking to do a little of investigation into that building and see, what the value may be, best and highest use. And that plays into community center. That plays into conversations with the school that Brian started, when he was chair, with his counterpart on,
Yeah.
on Southborough School Committee, that, I know the capital committee is now having with, school committee, and trying to continue some of those conversations, which I've had with the superintendent, just to see, is there, some way that we can maybe do something that makes sense for everybody. So, those things do continue. Hopefully, we can talk with a little bit more detail about those things, as we move forward.
Because definitely on my list of things to do is to call Roger and first collect on his bet that he lost to me because Harvard beat Yale in basketball. And he's avoided me since that game. But also to, as I said, everybody knows him. He's a wonderful guy. And because you're absolutely right, Mark. Having the schools involved in those discussions are going to be really important.
Yep.
About all of that stuff. And they could make our road a lot easier. And I'd like to think that they're going to help. So, all right.
Great.
So we're going to get a list for our next get together,
Yeah.
and each of us will take one, and Chelsea, you're going to get 8.
Okay, sounds good. I'll do it.
I
would do all of them.
No.
I wasn't trying to pawn it off to anyone.
No.
I'm happy to do everything.
Being facetious.
She's on record.
Okay, evaluate current operational processes, mailing, data exchange between departments, just see if there's any efficiencies that we can gain. I know I've heard from various residents about the mailings. I think we tried to address at least one of those with the transfer station. Are there other opportunities that we can gain there? And Sam, I think you had this one on there too.
Right, yeah.
You know, how are we exchanging data between departments? You know, can we improve on anything that's happening in payroll office or, you know, exchange between town clerk and another department? Are there better ways to track, you know, missing meeting minutes, that kind of thing?
And I think the one thing that, you know, and it depends how deeply this board wants to wade in, is that, you know, there are things that, you know, selectmen control departments, you know, will put in place in terms of, say, a permitting software, right? So that you've got all the departments using the same permitting software. So to your point, all that information is shared.
Yeah.
But then you may have, you know, some elected departments that decide, well, I want to use this, or I want to do this and that, and that's where those breakdowns happen, and, you know, and we don't necessarily, you know, I don't have really a say, you know,
Okay.
in what a department, so if the selectmen, you know, it's probably going to be some of those chair-to-chair discussions or things like that, you know, to talk about making sure that we're all, you know, using the same thing, and that way it would make it easier, you know, to share data, to share information on some of those things.
What is the best way, and maybe it's easy, but what's the best way to know exactly how many mailings the town, I mean, I guess maybe it's off the top of your head. I mean, we do the quarterly mailings for tax bills.
Tax and water.
That's probably the easiest one to quantify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Senior Center does a lot of mailings.
Is that covered through a grant, Mark, the senior?
Senior Center, yeah, the Senior Center's newsletter is covered through their grant.
A grant, yeah.
What is I mean, you're probably able to do most of it off the top of your head. What's the easiest way to get that in a document we could look at? Or is there an easy way?
I don't know, I don't know that there's an easy way, because outside of tax bills, and again, you know, town clerk's budget is going to look a lot different with some of, you know, with the new way that we're doing ballots, and, you know, we're doing voting. If you've peeked in the door of the townhouse or happened to, there's a big blue drop-off bin that is going to be installed next to the green drop-off bin, which is simply going to be for ballots.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I don't think that's going to be a temporary location. I really think that's going to be something that is going to become a new part of us.
Mark, how is rec done? Is that paid through Friends or the revolving fund?
It's out of revolving fund.
Are they doing mailings?
They're not for the fall because it's so up in the air, they don't have time
Yeah.
Historically.
to do it, but historically they do. I think it's twice a year, right?
Yeah, but I think they do a lot of it's a lot of backpack stuff, I thought. That it was going
No, you get like a, no, you get like a booklet.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I
sorry.
think it's twice a year, they
Yeah.
do spring and fall.
But they also just updated their website too, and I've gotten really good feedback about it, so
Yeah.
maybe they'll kind of move away from that and do an electronic version.
Tim is
I mean,
very focused on
that's
electronic.
a good conversation with Tim. I mean,
Yeah.
I get from the senior center and sure,
Yeah.
I guess the senior center.
Yeah.
Youth and Family Services, no, but certainly, Recreation
Yeah.
customers, 90-something% of them
Yeah.
Yeah,
have to be people who are at least as comfortable as I am on the internet. And it just strikes me that,
Mhm.
I didn't realize that I don't get it, I mean, I'm like,
yeah.
my kids are removed from this, so I don't get that recreation mailing
Mhm.
anymore, but that just.
I mean, it's really nice.
Yeah.
It is, so
It is.
I'm sure it's,
But they're also good about distributing it, though.
Oh, they-
The library and the townhouse, and,
Yeah.
I mean, it's all over town that
Yeah.
you can get a copy of it if you want one. I mean, I don't know specifically, are they still mailing them?
well, they were, but
Up
they're
until-
not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they just don't know what they're gonna be able to provide. But,
Yeah.
but I do think it's a worthy conversation to have with Tim and say, maybe it does make sense to have a few at the senior center so that if there
Yeah.
were senior programs that
Right.
they were having, but
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of value in mailing something like that
I
out.
agree.
So you-
I mean,
I think-
the last
I
time
think-
one of my
yeah.
kids read something that was in the mail, I can't tell you, they don't know what the mailbox is for.
Birthday cards. Yeah.
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 Because
Yeah.
antiquated
I
as
think
the
we've
house.
really, I know in the Selectmen's office, we've gotten away from a lot of, we used to mail, every year for, alcohol licenses. We had packets that were put together, and they were laid out on the table, and you took one of everything in that for the vet, and made sure it was the right person, you put it in their patent envelope, and you mailed everything out. That's all electronic now.
Yeah.
It's more of the one-off things. I've got to get this signed, an original copy back to the state for this grant, for this piece, for this. It's more of the one-off stuff now.
Yeah.
I mail very little. If I write a letter, it's usually because I'm PDFing it and sending it in an email.
Yeah, the one-off stuff doesn't, but for instance, again, the senior center is just different.
It is.
Yeah.
I got a 94-year-old mother
Yeah.
who, she,
Yeah.
trying to get her to use I have to put it on the website she's gonna look at.
Yeah.
And so I get that hard copy, that's why we did the mailing this year earlier that was done in hard copy, because there were, it's a generational thing. But
Yep.
boy, recreation, their users are kids,
Mhm.
and again, my kids, they don't know what the mail is for.
Yeah.
The idea that we're worried about having a mailing for them seems a little bit of beyond even belt and suspenders.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think if we can just take a look and have those conversations,
Mhm.
I think that would make sense.
Okay.
Okay, staffing needs, so I'd like to discuss, and we can add this to a future discussion, but having an individual article at town meeting for any added, positions. So, it would be a change in status, so either an added position or a change from part-time to full-time. Because I think it's more transparent at town meeting, so that folks, you go through the whole budget, but you don't really get into, did we add positions, or is this just, the cost of the services went up? I think, so that the residents can actually vote on those changes. And I know that this board, prior to me joining, took a position on no new positions for FY '22. I think that we just maybe would ask Mark to go out to all the departments and just reaffirm that the BOS took a position, that no new positions are being added, and let's just get that out there in July and confirm that will be for FY '22.
Well, I think,
That was without an identified revenue source.
Right, so in other words, no new hours or positions for fiscal '22 unless there is a new sustainable
Yeah,
revenue source that is identified to support it.
yeah.
Yep.
But I'd rather know now if somebody's looking to add that, because I don't think we're gonna know a sustainable revenue source now, but they would probably know if they're looking to add.
I
a
think
new
we're gonna have
position.
more deflating revenue sources
Well,
than we're gonna have,
Yeah. Yeah,
What is your sense, Mark? I mean, we communicated it pretty clearly that was in the context of other budget discussions. Do you think there's any again, I think the idea of going out and reaffirming that,
yeah.
by the way, we're in a new fiscal year, this
Yeah.
is just to, however,
Yeah.
communicate with the department heads,
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
Do you want the honest answer?
I'm sorry?
Do you want the honest answer?
Yeah.
I don't know that the departments think you'll stick to it.
Oh, interesting.
And the only reason I say that is because, you know, there was a lot of, you know, there were 3.5 positions that were added this year, you know, and that was pre-COVID. And then once we came back to reevaluate the budget, you know, the board wanted to keep those. And, you know, despite everything else I think that was going on, so I don't know. I think the board has got to send the message early and basically continue to send the message, because you're going to have people, even though you send the message, you're still going to have people, you're still going to have departments or boards or committees that are going to come and ask. And they're going to say, this is what we want, and we think we should have this. And, you know, I think it's, you know, the board's
Okay.
got to put your foot down.
Well, they first got to go through you.
They do. Well, you know, like I said, we gave you a budget that we thought was reasonable,
did
and then
last
you
year,
added
yeah.
3 positions on
Can
top
we
of it.
just
But
affirm at our next meeting, if it's
Yeah.
a matter of taking just a single vote and, you know, putting
Yeah.
a message out there loud and clear?
Well, I think the best way to do it, in my opinion, and just to get back to one of the things that I saw in here a couple of times is, you know, the wrap up for the end of the fiscal year. Everybody wants to see the winners and losers, right? Who turned back money, who spent everything, who needed more.
Yeah.
You know, you already kind of know the who needed more, and that's getting put together. When that's put together and, you know, Brian and Carla and I come in and give you that, I think that's a good time to basically say, you know, because we're going to start at that point to start to turn to look towards 22. You know, and I think that may be a good time to put the first stake out there and say, you know, look, we took this vote before, that was a previous iteration of the board, we have a new member and everything in that, you know, we'd like to, you know, to do that again. And if Brian was here, I'd ask him, you know, I kind of said to Brian, it'd be good if you were here so that you can, you know, kind of, you know, make sure that the board understands that this is going to be important moving forward. We're going to have a tough time supporting what we've got, never mind what we've got plus.
Yep.
I think of that message, though, being slightly more nuanced, I guess. I think of it in terms of no net new positions, because I think you leave open the possibility of restructuring internally in some ways and getting better positioned in certain areas than we are today, potentially. So I don't know.
I'd leave that out of it right now.
I was going to say, I'd be careful of the nuance
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah.
I would take a hard
Yeah,
line,
I agree.
and then if somebody brings something to you and can make sense, you know, you can always pivot a little bit,
Yeah.
but.
Because I will tell you, just based on my conversation with Kathy Cook today, and it's not anything different than the folks from advisory, and some members of the Board of Selectmen as well, and others in the town government were saying, and that is that there's a concern about IT.
Yeah.
Right,
And whether or not, regardless of whether or not we are properly staffed at the IT level.
Right.
Yep.
And you know, we're not going to shoot ourselves in the foot and say absolutely nothing, you know,
Yeah.
and leave this enormous risk out there if in fact, and people who know a lot more about this than I do seem to think there's a pretty big risk
Yeah.
on the
Well,
IT
and
side of things.
that's one of the nuances too. And again, this, you know, I don't know that, you know, I think you should lean on someone like, you know, MTC. You know, these are our technology, you know, committee. You know, this is what we'd established them for, to give Tom a resource to go to, because one person can't know everything in that. So, you know, what gaps are we missing? You know, what is Tom, you know, looking for in the assistant? What, you know, does he see that we need beyond that? I mean, I'm sure Tom would like, you know, 2 or 3 other people, but Tom understands the financial realities, and he does, you know, report to, is appointed by the Board of Selectmen, so he's going to be cognizant of those things. But yes, I think that's one of, you know, to Sam say, that's one of those nuances, you know, that you may have to consider, and you may have to, you know, take a look at saying, yeah, you know, we don't want to increase the net FTE, but we do need to do something for this department. Where is it coming from?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
You know?
Some of this falls under Chelsea's 5-year needs, the evaluate department needs for the next 5 years.
Yep.
Because I think I'm concerned that we have a long-term.
Yeah, and again, with COVID, I think we're gonna be experiencing a whole new world. Marty, you referenced this earlier with businesses and how businesses actually come back or don't come back.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know in Michigan, I'll use this for instance, they're big on shared space. You know, a group of companies get together, they rent offices and, conference rooms, there's 2 conference rooms, they have an on-staff cleaning person that comes in between, sanitizes both, and otherwise, working remotely has worked for a lot of these companies.
Yeah.
Whether that's gonna take place here, I don't know, but again, you mentioned this earlier, Mark, I mean, our revenues could be impacted by that as well.
Yep. Again, they could go up or down.
Exactly.
Again,
Yeah.
who knows?
Exactly.
There may be law firms that decide that, you know what, a lot of our lawyers live out in, you know, fill in the
Yeah.
blank, Sudbury, Southborough, wherever,
Yeah,
and we're gonna do something. They may not, you know? They may decide that the remote system works well enough,
and
but,
maybe this would be a good thing for EDC, and let's be on the forefront and fill up, you know, be at the forefront of getting some of these companies that are interested in a shared space.
Yep.
We have all these buildings on Route 9, easy access
no, I
to
agree.
everything, so maybe that's a goal we could give EDC to look into more.
And I think that, you know, we need to be creative at how we look at some of these things too.
Yeah.
You know, I had some of these conversations with Chelsea in her other life, you know, on advisory, and it's, you know, don't just assume we need more people. You know, there may be other ways to provide these services, you know, whether it's a, it's a program,
Mhm.
it's some kind of service that can be provided, remotely type of thing and everything. So, you know, it's just trying to be creative when somebody comes in and says, well, we need more people, or we need more money, we need this, you know, we've got to talk about those things, and I know we've in the past talked about, you know, doing zero-based budgets. You know, instead of just assuming I need this % more on top of everything, let's break everything down and say why you need these things, and then determine if that holds up first before we do anything else on top of that. It's a heavier exercise. You know, it may be something that, you know, that we want to consider, but I think the board's got to, you know, help to take the lead with that if that's how we decide we want to go.
All right, Chelsea, you wanna jump to budget software?
Sure, so, I know that we purchased a budget software.
We got it through a grant. Yeah.
Okay, so I think,
The first year anyway.
I think, you know, anytime you implement a new system, I think it makes sense to have some say into, how it's going to be used. And, you know, working with Brian and his team on what kind of involvement should BOS have, how should data requests work, how is this going to change our budget process? And I don't know, and I know Brian's not here, so I don't want to put you on the spot,
Mhm.
but I don't know if we have a timeline for how this gets implemented, but I do think it should be in this fiscal year.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think COVID slowed us down.
Uh-huh.
I think a lot of the data transfer has happened.
Okay.
It's just a matter of, trying to get 21's budget in so that it can be useful for 22.
Okay.
And then getting departments trained to
Mhm.
submit their budgets so that it all gets loaded in. You know, we're trying to get all the hands out of the process, which is, where the unintended mistakes can happen.
Mhm.
And then, like I said, people can see, Sam can go in, advisory can go in, John Q. Public can go and take a look and understand how things are working and what's, where there may be potential issues and everything too. So
Mark,
it
could we-
creates a
could
whole
we-
level of
Can
transparency.
we put on then for August, I don't know what Brian's schedule is, but we shouldn't be, for the August 18th meeting,
Yeah,
a presentation by Brian, and
Yep.
he can walk us through how
Sure.
this is gonna work.
Yeah, that would be great,
Yeah.
That would be.
yeah.
I think that's an excellent idea.
And so back to your point on the prior conversation, do you think that this budget software will enable us to look at year-over-year budgets and say, what do we really need? Will it give us that granular detail on evaluating what departments' needs really are, and are we just carrying this every year?
I'm gonna say it's gonna get, well, it's gonna get more granular than what you have now,
Okay,
and the information, everything in that, but, I think, for where you may wanna go, I'm not sure it's gonna go,
okay,
that deep and everything, but again, that's,
Okay.
that's easy enough to handle.
okay.
Okay, so on August 18th, we'll get Ryan on that.
Great, thank you. Next, I had committee program for diversity and inclusion, and Marty, I think you had something similar.
I have it as well. Can we kick that one
Yeah,
to the
let's
next
kick
one?
that one.
Because I think
Sure.
it's, what I'd like to do, we're at 8:42, I'd like to end at 9. Is that okay?
Okay. Wait a minute, I got 6 pages worth.
And then the next meeting, we can do my list,
Okay.
and then we're done.
Yeah.
I love it.
Sam's like, I put pants on for this,
You're around we'll schedule a meeting, and I'm,
Marty, what are you thinking for our next meeting? Sometime in August, or?
I was thinking in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll meet on the 18th.
I think that would be great to
In a couple of weeks-
continue.
In a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
you around?
Yep, yeah, we're just away the week before our August meeting, so that's second week in August. I'm not here.
You're not here, so you're not here like the
Week of
11th
the
or so?
10th,
Yeah,
right.
okay.
About maybe the first week.
So the first week,
First
yeah,
week, yeah.
that'd be 2 weeks.
That's good.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
All right,
August
and maybe
4th.
we can do it in person again. I actually think this is a much
is great.
easier,
I like
I
this
agree.
better, yeah,
you think the chiefs would let us, we've been reasonably good guests.
that's right.
No, I think we've been good guests. Like I said, we'll put Humpty Dumpty back together before we leave, which,
I brought wipes, I'll wipe down the table.
I think these are just particularly, these conversations lend themselves to the sort of bouncing
Yeah.
that
I
we've
agree.
had tonight.
I mean, I told you, I can't, I don't think any of us can be as effective as you can be in person,
Yeah.
right? So for doing something like this, I think it does make a lot of sense.
Yep.
So,
But again, I think the diversity one, I mean,
Yeah.
it's important, it's a big deal, but I don't want to rush the discussion.
Yeah, I agree.
Bigger discussion.
And then my last one, is adopt long-term plan for capital in conjunction with recommendations from the capital committee. And Marty, you kind of like echo everything that you had said, and I know Lisa's sitting on that committee. I think that they're moving pretty quickly on things, and, I just think we just need to be supportive and look at what they're doing.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll say about that, and I talked with Mark about it earlier, and I talked with Kathy about this earlier, and other folks, I mean, all through the spring, and in kicking articles over from our annual town meeting, our mantra has been, and we're looking at a special town meeting hopefully in the fall. Big maybe, in fact, maybe weighing more on the maybe not in the fall. I'm just not sure. I mean, we're not, you can't do an outdoor meeting in October. Good luck with rolling the dice on that. So maybe on August 18th, we take a look at the articles that we kicked and see, but I don't want to give anybody the false impression that, we are charging, headlong into a special town meeting in the fall without a appreciation and acknowledgement for what the hell is going on out there in the world and whether or not having a town meeting. Because the reason we kicked most of the articles that we kicked is because they weren't critical for the town functioning from a fiscal standpoint, but they also were critical for participation. And that remains the case. And so if there are articles that don't need to be acted on in a special town meeting in the fall, and we know we're not going to get a level of participation if we have a special town meeting in the fall, just because of where we find ourselves in the world right now, that we let folks know as early as possible that that is likely not to take place. So that's something I think we need to talk about at our August 18th meeting with a better idea. We'll have a better idea, to the extent anything's a better idea these days about COVID-19. But also, everybody take a look at the articles. Maybe I know planning has some articles. Could they live if they're not on for a special town meeting, but they're on for an annual town meeting in the, knock on wood, in the spring? There were citizen articles, that obviously people take very seriously. Are they going to be okay if understanding that there are, incredible logistical challenges to even thinking about a special town meeting in the fall. Anyway, I told Mark I was gonna preview that tonight. I just think that I don't want it lingering out there that there's definitely gonna be a special town meeting in the fall. I'm incredibly skeptical about our ability to pull that off.
So one thing on the capital piece I just want to mention, and because I've had conversations with the chair, he's really difficult.
Everybody looks at
Oh, I
you.
thought you meant the chair of the Board of Selectmen. I was gonna agree with you.
Yeah, right. So, no, but my, from a selfish point of view, as the leader for the finance team, my goal is to have capital committee come up with recommendations, that basically, that are, make a lot of sense, have the best, the best value, the best everything, and then just have that number plopped into the budget at the beginning, rather than trying to sacrifice capital halfway through the process at the end, saying, you know what, we really need this, I guess we're gonna let that culvert on Northborough Road go again. The plate's holding up, 5 years now, it's been good. So I'm hoping that, and I know that, Jason feels that way about capital as well, is, they'd like to come up with a plan and say, here is the capital plan, these are the numbers that, that should be inserted every year for capital, and then we don't have to really touch it so much, except when things change, when emergencies come up, when something happens we don't anticipate. And that would really make the budgeting process a lot better to have that number early, rather than have it dumped in a little bit late, and then, because again, we never sacrifice operations for capital, we always sacrifice it the other way around. So,
Marty, might it be useful to see if the moderator is available for that discussion on the 18th?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah,
It's just-
that's a very good idea.
And I know that there were information sessions that were canceled by
Yes.
planning board and that kind of
Yep.
thing. So what kind of leeway do they need in order to, I would think that they want to get their information out and somehow hold some forums, whether virtually or however. How much time do they need to know whether we're actually going to do it?
Yeah, and obviously the EDC has been
Yes.
pushing ahead with
Yeah.
the downtown initiative. And
Yeah.
again, none of this is to diminish any of that work or any of those. It's
Right.
just that we've got to be realistic about
Yeah.
whether or not it's even.
but you don't want to shortchange it either, to your point. You don't want to say, okay, we got 102 people,
Right.
and those are making decisions for the downtown. Those are, those are the number of people that are making very important decisions on some of these bylaws, and zoning issues.
Simply because others aren't comfortable for their
Correct.
safety and health.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
And so anyway, I told Mark I was gonna float that tonight, because the earlier we are having a conversation that the idea of a special town meeting in the fall seemed like a really good idea, when it seemed like normalcy might be
Yeah.
around a corner, and now who knows? I mean, it's kind of amazing. I mean, I work in downtown Boston, and I do not think I will be back in my office in 2020.
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's stunning to me.
My company has said 21.
Yeah, that's just stunning.
Yeah, isn't it crazy?
So,
Marcus, does the 18th give you enough time to reach out to the stakeholders on some of the articles to kind of judge,
Yeah, I mean, so, a lot of them are CPA,
yeah,
and a lot of them are planning. So really, planning and zoning pieces, yeah, so,
okay. Thank you.
I don't know that, I don't know it's a heavy lift.
Okay.
Again, you've got 2 citizen petitions, so, can see where those lay, but,
Okay, thank
yeah.
you.
you okay holding yours till the next meeting, Sam?
Yeah.
Or you wanna try to cover it in the next 10 minutes?
I think,
Whatever choice.
well, I can't say for all of
I know.
Sam's subsets, but I think in just trying to recall your list, a lot of, there was some overlap with
Sure.
the things that have been
Yeah.
discussed, so. You know.
We will lead with this at, what is 2 weeks? Is it August 4th?
The fourth,
On August 4th?
August
Okay.
4th?
yeah.
Same time, same place,
Yeah.
ideally.
Well, hopefully same place.
Yeah,
Will you talk to the chiefs?
I would suggest, possibly you doing that.
Okay.
I'm happy to do it, but I think
No, I will do it.
Carries a little more coming
I will
from you.
wander down here tomorrow. I
Yeah.
will do it in person.
Yep.
This is a lot of ground. It really was.
I think this was
So-
really productive.
Very,
Yep.
very helpful.
Yeah.
And I will just tell you, did anybody look at my list?
Yeah.
I did,
Yeah.
Does anybody know what number 10 is?
No.
It's
I
coming up
do.
on the 300-year anniversary?
It is.
Oh, there you go.
I was
It's on the
looking.
flag right behind
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Oh, my
Well,
gosh.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
Anybody who went to, middle school in Massachusetts, knows the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive, blah, 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 and we all know that poem. But I was looking at, I think it was town of Lexington's website, and they've got their 250th coming up
Yep.
in 2025 for the Battle of Lexington and Concord.
Yep.
And I went, oh, that's just a couple years, and I went, wait a minute, we don't have a committee.
Yeah.
We don't, and we're only gonna turn 300 once.
Right.
So-
So, Mr. Shea, does this mean you're gonna stay on until at least 2020?
Apparently interested.
He'll be in the middle,
Anyway.
See,
he'll be in the middle of his
It
fourth
wasn't a
term.
joke, was it?
You know, you could be the senior member.
Do we want to look at 6 o'clock, or do you want to stick with 6:30 for the 4th?
I'm fine with 6, that doesn't matter.
I do 6.
I could do either, yeah.
Yeah, let's do 6.
Six.
Then
6?
So
If
let's,
it runs a little bit longer, we'll have extra time, so.
Yeah, because we will finish with Sam's line. Are you gonna do one, Brian, or are you all set?
You know what, in all honesty, Mark had forwarded the copies of previous ones.
Yeah.
And again, I come from a time, the first time we did goal setting, we didn't even think about posting it in the police station, because none of us wanted to
I couldn't get a
step in that
quorum.
old rat trap building.
Ah.
So our goal setting at the time was this building. Our goal setting was really much more broader.
You had two big
scope.
things. You had public safety and you had Main Street.
Main Street,
Right.
yeah.
And those are really just the consuming issues. And then we figured, now that those two are kind of in process or, a little bit behind us almost, now you can start to focus on some of the smaller pieces, the organizational, the policy, and now you're dealing with this.
Yeah, no, and I think also a lot of the things that, weren't crossed off of previous lists are, what I'd love to see
All right.
moving forward as well.
Yeah, and I pulled some, Brian, I went back to the previous list.
Yeah.
So, no, I agree, we should certainly be looking at those
Yeah.
as well.
And the last thing is before somebody makes a motion to adjourn, it has been a long haul, but there's still a little bit of bump right near Morrow's, a lesser bump up near Sears Road,
Yeah.
but it is amazing, for the first time, I think since I lived in Southborough. You can drive down Main Street and the suspension on your car is not in
Yeah.
jeopardy.
Yeah.
It really is remarkable.
Well, I can
Yeah.
tell you, this weekend, we tried to avoid downtown a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah.
So we came up School Street, and there was no indication of the massive bump that was there.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought I was in a demolition derby. I
Yeah.
hit that, I was only doing like 15, 20 miles an hour, but holy smokes. I was like, okay, I had no clue that one was coming, so I'm glad that that's over and,
But the road already looks great. I actually like the intersection. I didn't think I would. It's kind of a neat, when you come down into it now, it's really clear and there's such beautiful, the library, St. Mark's Green,
yeah.
the community house. It really is kind of a neat look now coming into that intersection. That's the main thing I was worried about with the project. And now they're going on the aesthetic stuff. They're gonna start working on
And while-
sidewalks and the like.
They're targeting the end of this construction year, I think really to allow grass to grow in and all that. I think really next spring is when we're gonna notice it
Yep.
a lot more.
Yeah.
And hopefully, we can have, a nice Memorial Day weekend and actually be able to have a normal Memorial Day and, be able to
Yeah.
Yeah.
have everybody utilize that.
Road could become our new skateboard park. Very tempting.
It is, the other thing is, I didn't think it was gonna extend as far down towards the little downtown area as it does. I thought it stopped right at Park Street, but it extends another 50 feet or so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the downtown, it's not that big a push
Getting
to get
close.
the whole thing,
Yeah.
with a really nice street. So,
Yeah.
good stuff down on Main Street.
I think the sidewalks are gonna be great on Newton
I
Street.
think that.
Oh, yeah.
Bring that foot traffic down and.
Just a granite,
Oh, my gosh.
just a granite curb, you know, dresses that up really nicely. I mean, it's,
It's gonna be
and,
great.
you know.
Good stuff. All right, now, since I got a chance to talk about Main Street, someone can move to adjourn.
Power of the chair.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, folks. Good meeting.
Thank you.
Anyone want hand sanitizer before I put it away?
I'm good.
I have wipes too. For wipes. Didn't even eat my sand. I'm
All right.
so-
Done, Katie?
Marty,
Turn it off?
go ahead.
No.
Yeah.